Hey everybody, Jason Burmis here. And as you guys know, we are following very closely the election, selection, chaos 2020 from just about every single avenue. And when we're discussing this, we're very careful to give legitimacy to certain aspects of what's called election fraud, voter fraud, what's actually happening in these cases, not only on a state level, but a possible federal level. The actions and statements of Giuliani, of Powell, of the media, and trying to sort out the fact from fiction and where we're going from here. And somebody who's done simply amazing work on this subject prior to the 2020 selection, election, and voter fraud, election fraud, corruption in general, of course, is the Convo Couch. And joining us today from the Convo Couch is Pasta Jardula. You can follow him at Yo Pasta, and of course at the Convo Couch as well. Pasta, why don't you introduce yourself to my audience and then just fly into it. What are the new revelations over the last several days that are not being picked up on the mainstream media and we need to be aware of?
Well, yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on, Jason. It does mean a lot to me. I've been sending you some personal messages over the last couple of weeks because things have been so surreal. I watched your video, Loose Change, the other day, and it just was like a ton of bricks. And then watching stuff on the Senate floor unfold. And I just, I immediately transported my mind to like guys like yourself that were ahead of the curve and talking about this stuff, that over the course of 3 years of doing the Convo Couch, how we've transformed to looking at power and understanding power and suppression and how much our civil liberties mean to us. Like I said, it just hit me like a ton of bricks and watching your work and to opening my eyes to where I am today. I call myself a leftist libertarian. The Convo Couch is considered to be a little bit more left, me and my partner. But now I consider myself a leftist libertarian because I really, I don't take for granted the civil liberties or the power and the mechanisms that are working against us to try to shut us down. Now, my way of fighting against these powers has always been through election integrity. The three partners of the Convo Couch, we have dove into this for 3.5, 4 years now and chasing this stuff down. And more importantly, understanding the framework in which our elections are run and how they are run. Because to me, we look at power, we understand how power controls us and how it divides us. Well, what's the number one mechanism that keeps them in power? Well, these elections, right? At least that's what we think. And when you study elections of old, you study how the election system works today, you realize that there's a good chance there has never been a time when the people have elected somebody, but yet the oligarchs and the elites have selected the people who kept them in control of our resources. And where do we end up today? You know what I'm saying? Everything you talk about, this predator class built on transhumanism, it's quite scary. So there have been some positive things, though, going back to what the language that's now being used. A lot of Trump people now are kind of like a little late to the game to some of us leftists who are kind of digging this down because a small fraction of us on the left were so pissed off on what happened to Bernie Sanders in 2016 and all these other down ballot candidates that, we had this idea that we were going to go into the Democratic Party and change it from the inside. Yeah. Well, those memes of why don't you join the mafia or a cartel and try to change it from the inside kind of, really come to fruition right now because it's damn near impossible. But understand these elections and following what's going on and the time we're in right now today, it's crazy because what we're seeing now from the Trump team, a lot of positives, a few negatives, which we'll go over. And I'm going to kind of drop something on your show today that I haven't dropped anywhere. I'm going to give your audience some inside information because it's important for me to come on here and talk to you because I know this stuff and I understand this. And people ask me, Pasta, you seem so sure that this election wasn't real. It wasn't a fair election and stuff. You're so confident about it, and yet you don't have a smoking gun. But I tell people, well, if you understand elections, you understand the framework for elections, which is just a doorway for fraud, and then you watch the votes as they come in and how they come in, it's very easy to spot this stuff. And I was really, when I was like watching the Senate hearing and I was watching your movie, I'm like, wow, Jason spots this stuff so easy. He understands this stuff. I gotta listen to him. I gotta watch him more. And that's why I sent you that text that, man, you're slowly becoming one of my favorite channels to watch, because it's stuff we never talked about. The left, it was kind of like pigeonholed and talking about their issues and about racial justice and social justice and, what's going on in the prison system. And, it was just a different dialogue going on, and like we talked about on the other show, I get very concerned when I go out to these rallies and I see the people divided at each other, because when you look at your language, when you look at your show, you know what you're looking at? You're looking at the power control. You got to concentrate on who's in power, because the power, their number one method is keep us all divided, fighting with each other, and they run off with everything. But now we're on all new levels of power, levels of shit going on. You talk about transhumanism. It almost feels like the predator class, the elites, that we've become a nuisance to them. And I'm not just talking about any particular race. I'm talking about the human race. There's
and that's
too many of us.
Yeah.
They're pissed off and they want us out of the way.
Well, again, you just have to read their writings. And, you see, when I play Joe Biden in 2016 at the World Economic Forum talking about the fourth industrial revolution, he's already admitting then that the middle class has been hollowed out. He's already admitting then that those at the top and those at the bottom, the gap is widening. And he's talking about automation. He's talking about the future. And he's talking about it with this man who's just put out a book that literally the cover is COVID-19, The Great Reset. And one of those mechanisms of control is selection. Now, I would argue on local levels, you have a better chance of getting in your mayor, your sheriff. Not that corruption doesn't happen there, because it certainly does. But ever since we got to the point in national elections where there was no mechanism to check or actually recount the ballots, because we went to these digital systems, especially, I saw the writing on the wall that these would become more and more transparently rigged. One of the video clips I've been playing a lot lately, many people have hearkened to the Baker and Carter federal election reform paper, where they discuss HAVA, which is before and still not been enacted, where they discuss one person, one vote through a Real ID Act and actually having that ID card with them when they vote or get their absentee ballot. But what I never really saw discussed in the mainstream media was Jimmy Carter talking about the voting machines, the fact that they do not give you a receipt. This is in 2005, and already other nations had the system where you got the paper receipt, and that they weren't even auditing any of these machines randomly, whereas a 1 or 2% audit automatically may stop some people, not all people, from trying to commit voter fraud because they may be caught. So when you see this election, and there's so much to talk about, not only the digital voting, not only the Dominion systems, but then what's going after the fact to certify them statewide, what would you tell people is the most important to look at right now to begin to open their eyes to the idea that this may have been a rigged election?
Okay, well, let's talk about this. This is great. It's kind of funny that you mentioned the whole Jimmy Carter thing and whatnot, and we'll get into that. That whole theory about, when Giuliani and his team want to use Jimmy Carter to talk about the mail-in ballots, about them being fraudulent, he points to them. But then when he talks about where these machines come from, that they, once again, this was a mistake by Sidney Powell, and we'll get into that right now, about the ghost of Hugo Chavez and whatnot, and the Dominion situation. One of the things that Sidney Powell has said that is really positive, and people have to understand this, and this is the number one mechanism. This is the elephant in the room, if you would say. This is the number one problem with the elections. And even though there were other problems with this particular elections on how the establishment tried to steal this thing, it still comes, all roads lead to Rome. And that's to go back to the fact that we have proprietary software in our machines, and it's public funding. Once again, we pay for it, but we can't look at it. And that's what that means. And, the thing that really frustrated me about Sidney Powell is that she kind of went down this whole Hugo Chavez narrative, and then all of a sudden brought in the ideology of like communism bad. This is what's going on, that money, which really pissed me off right now, because quite frankly, we need all hands on deck for this one. And I'm having a hard time being one of the only guys on the left talking about this. Fiorella and I and Johnny, we're getting, you know, like there's nobody that's in our clan that is speaking the language we are, saying what's happened, calling it the way we feel it's very, very accurate because we follow these things. And it's kind of lonely. So now you start getting into people's minds a little bit on the left and you start talking to them. Here comes Sidney Powell dropping what smells to be the Russiagate of the right, you know what I'm saying? Which I'm not even saying that it's not true. It could be true. But she even doubles back and says the thing that we have to realize is that this feature, and she's using these words, that's the thing I love what's going on right now. You hear the Trump campaign using buzzwords that we've been talking about for 3-4 years now, saying, oh, you're speaking the language. One of the words she says is a feature. The software has a feature. It's not a bug. It's not a virus. It's a feature. And that feature is what's called a weighted election. Weighted elections used to stem from like condo associations and rental house associations. When an owner had a bigger space or more property than others, that person would get a vote on how things were going on as far as when they would decide on their board for rules and regulations. So it's a featured within the system, and they all have it now. And I'm going to talk about it. There's 4 companies in general that control 99% of the tabulation. 99% of the tabulation of ballots in America. That's Dominion that we heard of, Smartmatic, which runs the tabulation machines over here in California, ES&S, which I don't know if you saw the video with me, Tim Canova, and Nico House. Oh, you haven't seen it. We did a parody of Office Space when they took the copier outside. We had an ES&S machine. We beat the crap out of it. I'll send it to you. We did it in slow motion, the music. Me, Nico, and Tim Canova. And Tim Canova took the bat and he went to town. And Sidney Powell kind of pointed this out. All the mechanisms, all the machines have this software there. So no matter what we talk about, if there's anything that can come out of this, if Joe Biden carries on to go to the White House and things don't get worked through the courts and we don't get a hold of this situation, he becomes president. I'm praying that one thing we can change if we get the mentality there, and that's get rid of proprietary software for public funding. You know what I'm saying? If we have to go back to old school counting by hand, so be it. I'd like to see an open source system right there. But more important, we have to talk about the frameworks of these elections, and it's coming to fruition as Sidney Powell. It's like they're learning as we're going along. The other day, Giuliani was laying out the whole mail-in system. Now, between you and me, Jay, I called it on the show. Me and Fiorella, we talked about this. When they tried to pass the HEROES Act, the sneaky Democrats, the establishment, if you will, because I think if this election has told us anything, it's the establishment. It's not Republican or Democrat. It's Republicans and Democrats within the establishment that have turned their back on Donald Trump anyways. They never were there anyways. And it's almost like they said, keep our candidates safe and we'll give you Joe Biden. And that's why they got more seats in the House right now. You know, and now they're like using the Senate, holding the Senate hostage to see, well, let's see what happens over here. You know, if Trump works these through the court cases, they overturn this. We'll take the Senate or something. I don't know. You never know, understand the power moves being played behind there. But we're learning, like the Trump campaign is learning, and I hope they learn fast because they're behind on this shit. They're trying to catch up. I love what Sidney Powell was saying when it comes to certain situations. I hate what she said when it came to the Venezuela thing because she didn't have to go down that alley. She could have left it at there. They ended up in Venezuela. That's where the Office for Smartmatic is. You make your opinion on that and concentrate on the framework. Mm-hmm. The framework that we have in these elections, proprietary software, get rid of them.
Yeah.
Go ahead. You want to
well,
say?
I was just going to say when I was
Giuliani.
watching Powell in particular and Giuliani, and I tuned in to the last hour or so, I was kind of had to do a triple take when I heard Hugo Chavez's name, because at first I'm thinking to myself, well, she's saying Chavez supporter, so is she really referring to Maduro? And she's not correct. And then she referred to Maduro as well, and I'm like, all right, she's not making a mistake. And I think that's one of the biggest problems, right? These people still want to believe in left, right, Republicans there for your Constitution and Bill of Rights, Democrats are there for the socialist doctrine, and that's not really what we're seeing. We're seeing command and control through both mechanisms and using the media to kind of spread that. Like you said, the establishment has already dictated that Joe Biden has won this election. Nothing says that more than the Politico headline that says that Twitter will give the POTUS Twitter to Joe Biden, even if the election is quote unquote overturned. And all I can say to that is, What the fuck are you talking about? Either Trump wins in court or he doesn't. You don't get to decide if he doesn't leave office or he overturns the election that he's not the president of the United States. Yet these narratives pushing the media as the deciders without we the people being able to check up on the vote is more prominent now than ever. And if we don't get not a recount, but an actual accounting of how this election took place, what these features are, who enabled them, who enacted any of these changes, then we're really not going to be anywhere moving forward in getting rid of this terrible, cancerous system. There's one other thing I'd like to, get your take on before you move on, especially regarding the counts, the software. When she brought up this German server, within a day or so of that happening, I'm receiving, emails and DMs. They got the German server. They've got them by the balls, Jason. This is it. It's the deep state takedown. And one of the very telling moments in that press conference is when Powell is actually asked about this. She confirms the German server was taken, but she literally says, we don't know if the good guys or the bad guys got it. Well, think about that. She's referring to the intelligence or military apparatuses in the United States, not as one entity as the good guys or as another entity as the bad guys, but as a mixed bag, and we don't know who on the inside have that. That should have been headlines everywhere just based on that alone, and we didn't see it anywhere. So what's your take on this server and whether or not that's going to be an integral part of this?
Well, here's the thing. I don't know if it's true about the server, good guys, bad guys, whatnot, but it does kind of give you a piece of puzzle within the mechanism that's going on. And the fact is that our tabulation machines can be accessed remotely. In other words, you could be in Germany, you could be across the street, you could be wherever you got to be, and you can remotely access the server and the count, and you can change everything from a distance. You don't have to be necessarily hooked up to the room. I think that's like, and it's kind of funny. We heard the term hammer and scorecard now, which was what, the CIA and the intelligence community were using, whatnot. That's the program. For us, we've known it as called fraction magic. That's where Bev Harris and Beanie Smith, these people, if you want to look them up, we just did a show with Beanie Smith, who was the software engineer who talks about this. But all hammer and scorecard did wasn't tell us anything we knew that we didn't know, but it did solidify for sure that you can access this stuff remotely. So I don't know if it's being accessed from Germany or wherever or not, but it does complete that piece of the puzzle and say, hey, listen, we can access this remotely over here. These tabulations could be changed remotely. They don't even have to be in the same friggin' room. And that's a problem with these tabulation machines. And that's why we need open source. She also mentioned the fraction of it. She talked about the fraction magic, and it's very, very important. That's what this feature does, these weighted features. And Sidney Powell also talked very importantly, too, as well, is that when you look into these companies, not only do they have proprietary software, they have proprietary ownership. She couldn't even tell you exactly who had the big stake in Smartmatic or in Dominion or any of these companies, because they're like zombie companies of another zombie companies of, hedge funds where you don't know who's investing the money and who has a stake in the game over here. And that should be alarming in itself. I've heard all the theories out there with the watermarks and the stamps and everything like that. And
let's talk about that really quickly. Let's talk about that really quickly because, I think that's really, really important. So that was another thing right around the time of the German server that I was constantly getting sent by people, right? Now, whereas the German server didn't have a lot, the Gateway Pundit, who I always take with a grain of salt, they started reporting on it. So I said, all right, maybe there is something there. But of course, with the idea not of watermarks or QR codes that are included in statewide ballots, depending on the area that are put there, right? That everybody knows about. You had Steve Pieczenik, somebody who's a lifelong intelligence analyst, go on the Alex Jones show, who has not been a reliable source, no matter what Alex Jones tells you. I've watched these interviews throughout the years. I've never trusted Pieczenik. He's the main source for the Tom Clancy novels. And remember, those novels aren't just novels, guys. They're novels. They're TV. They're friggin' movies. They're video games. They're everything. They're the propaganda mechanism of the military-industrial complex to tell you about tough guys that are taking on the terrorists and America's number one. And with him saying things like they had a secret QR code water stamp mark that was going to entrap the deep state, as if something could be put on a national level without corruption like that to take down maybe the most corrupt entity on the planet, or at least that's what you portrayed them as, is absolutely absurd and ludicrous. And Owen Schroyer, come on, man. As much as I think that you're a good guy trying to do good, for you not to call him out on that bullshit fucking immediately. I don't care how much you like the guy, immediately, that's on you. That's on you. David Knight did the right thing the next day and went off about it because it was fucking imagination land. It was hopium to the max, and it confuses the issue. So,
it does. The issue.
What's your take on that?
Well, a lot of people, when I ask them, do you know where the mail-in ballots come from? They don't know. You know what I'm saying? They don't understand this. Now, from Los Angeles, I'm here. I understand exactly where they come from because a couple of years ago, we started hunting this down, and I started saying to myself, and it was funny because we were just talking about the JFK election out there against Nixon and whatnot, and there was a story that was stolen through the mail-ins, and dead people had voted, thousands of dead people, in particular in Illinois in one area and in Texas in another area. Lyndon Johnson, Joe Kennedy, fix the election, get the sun in, that kind of thing. So I started hunting down and trying to understand these particular mail-in ballots and these absentee ballots, where they come from. So I was very lucky because we have been following a certain court case. His name is Raji Robb. He's running against Brad Sherman, whatnot. And also there's, contracts out there if you make public requests for. So I got a hold of the contract that Los Angeles has with this company called K&H. Really, you got to sift through the bullshit when you're talking to these registrars who work for these secretaries of state who run these elections. They don't want to give you this information. They make you work for it. But it took a lot of work. And I was very, very confused and trying to understand what was going on. So I had the contract right there, and I understood this company, K&H, which is like these proprietary companies who own all the tabulation machines. You don't know who owns them. And they work in conjunction with the tabulation machines because they got to make their paper applicable, is that the word, or work together. So therefore, it's another money scam to just suck out a ton of money because you have to hire a certain paper company. Now, I looked through the contract, Jay, and I was looking to find out where they got their paper from. I couldn't find any information on that to confirm or deny what's going on. I naturally didn't believe in it, but I started following up when I heard about the watermarks and whatnot, and there's nothing that says where these paper companies have to get their paper from. Mm-hmm. So I can't confirm or deny that to be true or false. But once again, it doesn't say that they have to get paper from the State Department or the Department of Homeland Security or anything like that. So I don't believe the story. I never really have. But looking through a contract, it's not there. They don't connect the dots to say where these companies have to get their paper from or not.
So moving on, because again, I think that is largely a distraction. It's hopium for the masses. The media continues to say that not only does Trump not have evidence, but the talking point is not have evidence of voter fraud or election fraud. It's widespread voter fraud or election fraud, giving it that window of semantics that the evidence can grow, but it's still not going to be, quote unquote, widespread enough. And the other talking points of the media is that he is continually losing in court, and even his base is no longer really behind him, behind the scenes. Go into what's actually going on in the court cases in each state and where you see it going federally from here.
Yeah. Well, it's got to work its process out. Everything that was kind of filed earlier was filed by individuals that you maybe worked with the Trump campaign, but they haven't really come with their big lawsuits yet. And in fact, another lawyer from the Trump team just said, what's his name? Jacob Ludko, I think his name is. I can't even remember his name. He had said that they're going to be dropping some cases on probably Wednesday coming up this week. These are powerhouse cases that they're going to be dropped, and they're going to be dropped in Wisconsin, Georgia, Pennsylvania, whatnot. But working within the premise of what we can really actually get done, and where I think it's the best benefit for the team to work for the benefit of the president, is in the area where they're working at. The two areas, obviously, what Cindy Powell's talking about is a long road to get there. You know what I'm saying? She's talking the right language. She talked about fractions. And before we leave, I'm going to also drop something on you, too, as well, that I know from insider information that I think it's important for your audience to hear, and a lot of people are going to hear it out there. But the area where they really have a lot of case where they can push forward is in the lack of scrutiny of these ballots. Like I said, Nancy Pelosi tried to remove the HAVA Act, an amendment that said that 32 states did not have to verify their absentee or mail-in ballots with signatures. McConnell and Trump laughed at it. It wasn't really about the money with the HEROES Act as much as it was for her trying to steal the election right there, because they understood that with the COVID there, it presented an opportunity for them to get these ballots out. Talk about these paper companies. They send out all these ballots. Everybody on the voter rolls in California got a ballot, which is crazy. They just shotgun them out. So when those get sent out and somebody's dead, somebody's moved, where do they go back to? They go back to where they were sent out from. From that point on, a nefarious character can hand these ballots over. And with ballot harvesting that Tulsi Gabbard went after to try to strike down, you or I, Jay, can go walking in there with thousands of ballots and just hand them in. Now, in certain states, unlike Nevada, unlike California, unlike, I believe, in Georgia, where they use these AI machines to verify ballots and they lowered the sensitivity rate where a scribble can get through, other states like Wisconsin, like Pennsylvania, like Michigan, have a strict rule where the ballots have to be scrutinized by election officials that sign up through both parties, so both parties checks each other. So the traditional way is that a mail-in ballot is held up at a table. It says one vote for Trump, Republican says yes, Democrat says yes, it goes in the yes pile. One vote for Biden, Democrat says yes, Republican says no, it goes in the disputed pile. Well, the Democrats knew that they have to have a backup plan other than the fact that if they can flip votes with the software, they still needed ballot backups to stuff the ballot box to get them in there to keep these counts whole. There was a count in Georgia, but once again, in the recount, they didn't scrutinize the signatures. Trump has a legitimate case that people in Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, these three areas where they stole the night, that both parties didn't get to scrutinize the ballots properly. So what Giuliani and his team are trying to do is devalidate or unvalidate or discredit those ballots that were not scrutinized by both parties, lower the count, get Trump over the top, and get him the numbers and go in. If that doesn't work, they remember Trump has appointed a lot of federal judges. He's got the Supreme Court. People say, I don't think so, because I know that 5 people on that Supreme Court are establishment in my mind. I'm not trusting Clarence Thomas. He was a Bush appointee, and I ain't trusting friggin' Roberts. He's another Bush appointee. So you better forget about it. They're going to get in line. He might have the 3 horsemen that he put in there, but don't count on the other 5 to save him. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, there are, once again, the court cases where a lot of people are saying, oh, you've had all these court cases thrown out. That's kind of hogwash, right? Mm-hmm. They need time to get these court cases together. And in fact, Giuliani said in his open statements too as well, and guy I had on the show yesterday, Dr. Shiva, is that they're going to start presenting statistical analysis, which is really important, where you find these charts that are made of how these votings come in, and then you see this parabolic effect where the chart goes crazy and it just goes in a different way out of the blue. Those are signs for these statistical analysis, these mathematicians who do these plots and these patterns to have their day in court. And when you look at what they're doing, it makes a lot of sense. Dr. Shiva makes a lot of sense, and you can see what's going on. And he can show you, well, this is not making sense. It's outside the pattern. Because you've watched a primary before, right, Jay? Mm-hmm. Bernie Sanders running against Biden, right? And this is where we caught it with the naked eye. Me and Nico were sitting in this seat right here, in this couch. Fiorella was out and about. She was doing boots on the ground. We were reporting the election. By the way, YouTube took the video down, said we're not allowed to show false, misleading. Yeah, it was our first warning, right? Then we got the strike on the Wayfair story, whatever. But the first warning was that Super Tuesday. And we were sitting here, and they were calling Texas. And all of a sudden, Sanders had built a beautiful lead. 40% was in. He was moving his lead up slowly but surely. But all of a sudden, boom, out of the blue, here comes Biden. And he's charging like Secretariat, coming down the backstretch. And we're going, wait, something's wrong. Something's wrong here, and he ends up winning the state. Michigan, right? And we saw something there, and I did a show on this. I said, just watch how his votes come in, because you got to watch. This is when either dumps happen or computer flips. It doesn't happen that way. When the sample size comes in, for instance, Biden versus Bernie, Michigan, 54% of the vote is in. Biden's up by 100,000 votes. They're going to call it for him. Give Michigan to Joe Biden, and people are in line going, wait a second. I didn't even get a chance to vote. How can you call this? You still have 45% of the people who have to vote here, and you're calling it. Well, they tell you, voting patterns are very consistent. And the voting pattern that came in for the first 50% of the votes showed that Biden was continuing this kind of, build his lead or have a sample side where he can't get caught. And then they call the election and you're like, what's going on? Fast forward to election night over here, Michigan, the same state, 59% of the vote in, 5% more than in the primary when they called it for Joe Biden. Trump has a 325,000 vote lead. It is the general more votes. And you're saying to yourself, hey, why aren't they calling this for Donald Trump right here? Joe Biden's out of real estate. He's not going to catch up. There's no way. But all of a sudden you see this mass dump and this flip late at night. That's a mathematical anomaly. Votes don't come in like that. People were trying to say, well, it was the mail-in votes coming in. No, there was supposed to be maybe a lag of mail-in votes, but there were mail-in votes coming all night in, my friend. This doesn't happen unless somebody's doing something, and the establishment uses the narrative when they want to call the elections for their establishment candidate, but then they'll hang you out to dry. And look what they did for Donald Trump over here. I mean, they did this in Michigan. They did this in Wisconsin. They did this in Pennsylvania. He was out of real estate. The only way this happens is if somebody made a large dump of these mail-in ballots, they can walk in, or a computer flips something and something happened. And by the way, for your audience out there, 2 glitches. No such thing as a freaking glitch. No such thing as a freaking glitch. The computer is doing what it's told to do. It wasn't a human error. It was a human who found it and reported that glitch. I want to get a shirt that says glitch this. Their dirty fingerprints are all over this, Jay. Over. This was an easy one to call.
Well, let's
and my
talk about
information to break to you real quick is, and I'm going to break this right now, and then I'll let you go, because while we're talking about Bernie Sanders, Sidney Powell said the other day on Newsmax, plain and simple, they told Bernie Sanders about this. People went to him with the data, and twice he chose not to fight back. And I don't know what Bernie Sanders is going to say, but I'm going to tell you this. We've been working on election integrity for a while. We're making a documented. We have interviewed people, talked to people. I've had somebody personally tell me off the record, they brought this data to Bernie Sanders in 2016. He had the money. He had the resources. They wanted to get in there, protest the election in certain states, seize the data, have an autopsy, and make sure that the vote counted. Bernie Sanders chose not to do it, not once, but twice. And that's no friggin' lie. And I want to hear what this son of a bitch has to say right now, who sold us out down the river, because twice, and there were people who left his campaign because of this. Bernie Sanders had a chance, and he said no, Jay.
Well, I've always been very critical of Bernie Sanders because I not only believed he won in 2020, but he won in 2016. He refused to challenge it. He went along to go along. That's when he cut his little book deal, made a little more scratch, became more prominent, was a little bit on the talk show or the talk news show circuits and some of these, mainline shows, but they never really gave him the platform to become the front runner, even though he was the entire time in 2020. What I want to kind of end on is you talking about statistics and really the scientific method. Right now, one of the huge talking points of the quote-unquote mainstream left is we believe science. We believe science. Believe science. Well, scientifically, like you said, if you look at these patterns of how these ballots were coming in, you can literally go to our entire American history of not only presidential elections, but congressional elections and Senate elections and see those same patterns that have never been defied before in mass like today. But they will do the mental gymnastics necessary to flip it on its head and say that you pointing out these statistical anomalies makes you a conspiracy theorist and you no longer believe in science. What are your thoughts on that?
Best tweet I saw about that was definitely Kevin Sorbo. And he says, I flipped the coin 138,000 times and it landed on heads every single time. Believe me. It's just so hysterical on its face for them to say this. But you know what, Jay? They've prepared themselves with the ballots as a backup. They used the whole coronavirus to say, well, listen, we have all these extra ballots out there. It's a different election this time. And they even had the mainstream media going along. When the mainstream media would be up at the boards, we have more ballots coming in this area. And here's the big lie, and this is the third reason. I said there were three reasons we knew they were going to use the mail-ins to stuff the ballot box, because they had to have a backup from the computers, because of all the statistical analysis and the mathematical anomalies that they can say, hey, what's going on? Well, if they do the recount, they got the ballots in there that they stuffed. So they have to just find a way to forego the signature part. They couldn't get it in the HEROES Act. So we'll get our Democratic members in these areas to shun out the Republicans, make sure they have to use binoculars to look, and just throw through ballots of Mickey Mouse and pull all these other games. But when it comes to the whole thing, when they say, oh, don't look at this, you have to look about what really is the truth. One of the big truths is that Democrats don't favor mail-in ballots. Usually it's older people who favor the mail-in system, which tend to be more conservative. So you have to listen to their lies and their language where you don't want to believe in science. Like, I wanted to get one of the old school math hats that friggin' Andrew Yang had. It said, it's simple math. These are mathematical anomalies. You can't listen to this, but you know they're going to push back no matter what. This is about power maintaining control. It's not a joke that $16 million big tech gave to Joe Biden and less than $500,000 they gave to Donald Trump. You know what I'm saying? So they can take that narrative of lying, of saying you're crazy, of saying you're a right winger or a conspiracy theorist, and regurgitate it. And unfortunately, you have a bunch of people on the left in sitting there and standing behind what the Democratic establishment did, or the establishment did, and Joe Biden did, and it was the same mechanisms they used and the same language they used, Jay, to keep Bernie Sanders down and his followers believing. It's sad to see these Bernie Sanders fans regurgitate and say the same methods that were used against him are okay. And I told them, if you okay the establishment cheating Donald Trump the way they are, you're not saying it's okay when a progressive candidate runs. You're giving them a permission slip. So they can go eat a bag of Richards for telling us we're crazy, for pointing out the science and the math and the mathematical anomalies. And once again, let's just go through this process. Rudy Giuliani laid it out. This is how mail-in ballots work. There is no lie when you say this is the biggest area for fraud. They used to call this the secret ballot back in the days, because you don't know where it's coming in from. You don't know how it gets there. And then with the ballot harvesting, it's another thing. But I'm just hoping that he continues to work the process. Continue to use the word election fraud, because this is election fraud. This isn't voter fraud. Voter fraud is the individuals trying to do some stuff to swing an election. Didn't come into play here. This is the body, the establishment, the Democratic establishment or the Republicans, whatever you want. It is election fraud, because they did. I don't believe the Hugo Chavez stuff, but when Giuliani goes, look at these states and what's going on, there had to be a mass consolidated effort to do this. Well, I don't know if each state knew what they were doing, but somebody up top was pulling the strings. And they systematically went after this. They went out after this with a conscience over here. They knew what they were doing. They knew how to play the game. And once again, I can tell you this much: when it comes to the left, with a lot of these leftist people, they have a nasty authoritarian streak in them, and they think the ends justify the means, Jay. So they're regurgitating the lies and they're going along with it because Trump is the scariest thing to them on the planet.
And I would say it's not only enabling; it actually encourages them to commit more fraud, knowing
Absolutely.
They were able to get away with this type of thing. And one of the other, I think, points that needs to be made is the mainstream narrative that was put out pre-election only seemed to come to fruition in one area. All of the polls were wrong. Trump got more black voters than any Republican in history. He got more votes by about 10 million than he did previously. Every single poll was wrong. Every single narrative was wrong, except for the red mirage of the night of the election, where it would appear that Trump won, but by morn it would be a different story, and we might have to take several days or weeks. That's the only narrative the media was able to put out that came to fruition, and I believe that is because it is largely controlled by them and big tech, and they let us know they were going to do this from the outset. So, Pasta, what are the next steps in trying to explain this to people, and how can people, get a hold of you? Obviously, the Convo Couch is where you want to subscribe on YouTube. You want to follow Yo Pasta on Twitter and at the Convo Couch. But how can more people not only become aware, but get involved so we can actually, get a thinking populace again?
Can you pull up Dr. Shiva's just put in Dr. Shiva. I had him on yesterday because we were talking about solutions going down the road with this situation, moving along, and kind of what we were talking about today. No, if you go to Dr. Shiva's Twitter real quick, I'm so sorry. And he talks about we have to, there he is. If you scroll down just a little bit, I'm going to show you right there. Okay, click on that right over here. This is something I was thinking about for your event that's going on when you're talking about going to the state capitals, the local areas, whatnot. This is about taking accountability into our own hands. We're sitting there, we're talking about the framework of these elections, and that's what I'm really happy that's coming out right now. Even Giuliani kind of explaining provisional ballots was a cute part because we were laughing because we've seen how provisionals have been used here in California to swing an election and push people into these provisional ballots that were going to vote for more populist progressive candidate. And these provisionals might get counted, they might not get counted. And it was so funny because I know a lot of people were silent on this when we were screaming this shit. And, even Donald Trump said, they cheated Bernie Sanders, but we were hoping that somebody would come along in his Justice Department and give us some real justice and make sure that this stuff wouldn't happen again. And we would have had what we wanted, which was Bernie Sanders on one side, Donald Trump on the other. We have some real discussions about what's going on, two populists on both sides, and we can have some real, dialogue and none of this phony establishment bullshit. But nothing happened because the Democratic Party is a corporation and a private entity. So we're on our own. And they even said in Jared Beck's case, they have the right to do what they want when they want. So provisional ballots is one of the things we've saw, and hearing Giuliani explain it like, hey, they did this to older retired white people in Pittsburgh, so therefore they could steal their vote. And it was in a way it's saying, look, they just used this against you guys. They used it against Latinos and hipsters in California, in my area. You got to understand the mechanism. So it's great to get all this information about the framework, but what do we do from there, right? Where do we go from here? Dr. Shiva talks about this right now. And if you look, there's two things you can do. You can demand the voter list and you can demand the data from the votes after to make sure there's not more votes than voters. In other words, you can hold your local office accountable by requesting these two pieces of data, right? And you can see the Fugazi action that happens. And a lot of times they'll stall you on giving you this information. And in Massachusetts, where he was, they weren't giving him this information. Well, 20 of them showed up at the state building, whatnot, demanding it with no mask and saying, we ain't playing your bullshit. We're not leaving till you give it to us. And they gave it to them. So they had data. And then they showed that data to show how bad these elections were, that there were more votes than voters in that area. And then you get to look that politician right in the friggin' eye and say, I'm going to come after your ass. It's different when it's up close. These people are so far away on a national level, but I plan to do this. And I encourage everybody, go to this here. So when we go to your event on the 10th, we should have people with pieces of paper. And here's the thing, Dr. Shiva says, send him the data and he'll analyze it for you. Like he's going to do the work for you. He's building a coalition of us taking this back into our own hands, starting locally, Jay. I mean, really, to tell you the truth, it was very heartwarming yesterday talking to him because I felt like I had some solutions. Because Dr. Shiva, they're trying to smear him as a right-wing nut job now and a conspiracy theorist when the guy is nothing more than anti-establishment. He's anti-establishment. He ran as an independent, then he ran as a Republican. He's anti-establishment through and through the brim. And all he wants us to do is get some accountability in our elections, and he's found a way. Let's start from the ground. Go to that page, demand the data he wants. You can send it to Shiva. He'll do the work for you, and then we'll have it on file. What the hell is going on? We're watching you. We got you. And we show up at that state capitol. And that's some fuel to put on the fire. Look, they're screwing us. They're choosing their officials. Look at the data. So I encourage everybody who's going to get involved with your thing, go to Shiva's page. Let's get this information. Let's start from the ground. Bernie Sanders was right about one thing, for sure. He was right about many other things, but one thing he was really right about was it starts from the ground up, and then works its way up. I guess that's the only thing we can do, Jay, because like I told you, I'm at a loss sometimes, and I'm ready to unplug and get back into the matrix and just say, forget about this shit, especially the shit you've been looking at for years. It's like, wow, plug me back in and give me steak, even though I'm a vegan here trying to fight. I'm a vegan trying to fight what's going on right now. You know what I'm saying?
Listen, I'm going to get mine no matter what. I'm going to have that steak. And, I'm not going to lie. We're in some dire straits right now, not only election, obviously the lockdown, the tech crunch on speech, censorship. It's all coming to a head. And to me, one of the things that's important is that we don't lose sight of this stuff and we still are able to have fun. And although it needs to be a big part of our lives, it can't dominate us to the point that we're fooled into thinking ignorance is bliss and plug me back in. I'm not saying I'm fucking Neo, because I'm not. But I promise your ass, I'm also not the shifty dude eating that steak dinner wanting to be a fucking Hollywood star, because I don't give a shit about fame. I don't give a shit about those fucking plastic, iconic, bullshit things they promote to you constantly in the mainstream to keep up with the Kardashian, to dance with the stars, and to check out a masked fucking singer. I don't. It's not my thing. Okay, but if that's your thing, and you want those things to continue, you better have our backs and get on board and educate yourself just in the littlest bit to start fighting this very real anti-human automation nation UBI transhumanist agenda. And to find out how you can do so via the election, please go check out the Convo Couch. They are also not only on the YouTube platform, you're on the Rockfin platform, as I stated before, at Yo Pasta and at the Convo Couch on Twitter. How else can people support and follow you before we let you go?
That is the main way. Rockfin is definitely the way we want to go because they don't suppress our voices and we can get it out there. It's great to watch this right now and see over 600 people watching the show right now. And thank you again, Jason, for letting me coming on. I thought it was important. But yes, just the Convo Couch. Get over to that Rockfin, sign up. If you can endorse for $9.99, please do. You get everybody's premium content across the board. And as far as this election goes, don't be distraught that you're hearing all these court cases throwing out. It's just playing its process right now. And for an election integrity activist to see all this type of language coming on, we use the word black box voting and all this stuff. And yeah, just watch the Convo Couch. We have a lot of guests on who talk about this. But I'm saying wait for Wednesday, wait for Friday. We're going to see some lawsuits drop. Remember with Al Gore, he took forever for 2 counties with hanging chads. We have multiple states, multiple counties. There's a lot of stuff going on. There's new information going on in Vegas right now that I have people calling me on. Information going on in Georgia with the recount. Now Kemp stepping in. Wisconsin, they're going through the audit period process. We wanted to go fly out to Wisconsin, and Wisconsin's one of those states where they consider mail-in ballots a privilege, not a right. So they didn't just send them out to everybody in the voter roll. They sent them out to only people who requested them. Jason, who requested more mail-in ballots in Wisconsin, Democrats or Republicans?
I would imagine Republicans.
You better believe it. So when these late-night dumps are coming with a bunch of Democratic Biden-only votes, suspicious as can be. And that's what they're doing in Wisconsin. They're going to match up those mail-in ballots with people who requested them. So if they find some Fugazi ballots, and remember, he's less than 21,000 votes down there, maybe they can decertify some of those ballots and then swing the state to Trump. We're going to see. It's not just about Donald Trump or Joe Biden here. It's about the masses understanding the framework and straightening it out moving forward, understanding the mechanisms which we can challenge and get in these people's faces. It's at a local level, but then we have to change the framework down the road because this right here, Jay, this was my way of going after power. This is my way of taking it away from the elites and saying, if we get this right, I know our fellow humans will get populist candidates with populist ideas and populist policies, and we will take our country back or take it for the first time ever, and then maybe take the world back and have a beautiful earth to live on.
Well, it's always going to be a challenge. Pasta Jardula of the Convo Couch, thank you so much. We'll have to do it next week, man. Get at me. Let's do it next week as well.
Jay.
Let's do the update. All right, brother?
And Fiorella wants you to have you on the show. She wants to have a conversation with you, too, as well. So make sure you get back on our show. We love your insight. Like I said, I just want to blow a little bit more sunshine up your ass before we leave, Jay, because you have slowly been becoming one of my favorite channels, and everything you speak, I feel like you're opening up another world that I didn't know about. And it was kind of funny because one of my old bosses pointed you out. He goes, "Oh, dude, Jay Berman is he's on Rockfin with you guys now." And I'm like, "Who's Jason Berman?" And you don't know who Jason Berman is? And this was a boss when we would argue at work. He would go, "What does that have to do with Building 7?" And we just go, "Okay." So, he told me about you, and I'm just loving the work. And I think it's really important that we watch each other's show because everybody's first opinions about you, oh, he's an Alex Jones lackey and blah, 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 and he's an all-right guy, and he's a QAnoner. And then when you start looking into Jason Berman, you're like, no, he's not. No, he's not. And this guy has got a lot of sense, and he's opening my eyes to things I wouldn't look at before. So now I have this different outlook on everything in life, my whole, changing of or evolution of Pasta, Jardula, and Fiorello and where we are right now, it has a lot to do with listening to people who don't necessarily talk about the things we talk about or have different ideas we do. And it's been nothing but a pleasure, Jay, following your channel and working with you and going on your shows. And I look forward to doing more of it because it's been awesome. And thank you, Jay.
Thank you, man. That was so sweet. And Pasta will be in touch. That's Pasta Jardula, everybody. Guys, he's killing it. Make sure you check him out over at the Convo Couch. Make sure that you are subscribed over at Rockfin. If it's not to myself or Pasta, somebody out there, you get all the premium content. Remember, make the free account on top of that, and you can follow me at 11 a.m. Monday through Friday. Remember, I'm fully demonetized on this platform, 7+ months. I couldn't do this several times a day without you guys. $5, $10, $15, big donors. You absolutely mean the world to me. Again, Rockfin, 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 and some more. Rockfin. If I do get kicked off of this platform for daring to question the establishment, you'll have to find me there. So at least go make the free account now. The documentary films are free for everybody, and I encourage you to share them with as many people as possible. Loose Change Final Cut, Fabled Enemies, Invisible Empire, A New World Order Defined, and Shade the Motion Picture, available here right now for free in the documentaries playlist section. Thumbs it up, subscribe, and share. Join the Burmese Brigade if you haven't. I love you guys, and I'll see you on the flip side.